I'm Jack Ruston. Welcome to the Ruston's Boneyard podcast. We're talking about real food, traditional cooking, nutrition, health and exercise. We're asking whether a more primal approach to life brings us further in line with the biology evolution has given us. We'll be exploring some of these topics with expert guests from the worlds of clinical practice and research. I'm not qualified to give any sort of medical or dietary advice, and nothing in this material should be considered as such. The opinions expressed here are for the purposes of discussion only. Please consult a qualified medical professional before undertaking changes to your diet. And now, on with the show. Thomas Joseph is a former investment banker who moved into butchery in order to realise his true passion to produce, source and deliver exceptional quality meat reared to the highest ethical standards. His family run Coxtie Green Farm in Essex, just east of London, from which the butchery and farm shop are based. Tom is a master of dry aging beef and sources the finest meat from around the UK, Europe and further afield. Tom, thanks so much for being here.
Not a problem at all, mate. Anything for the old mate Jack Ruston, Ruston's Boneyard.
That's right. So look, what are you? Are you a butcher or are you a meat dealer or what?
I'm none of that really, to be honest with you. You know, I know butchery in and out, but I'm not a butcher. I guess I saw a massive opportunity in a market that I think had a lot of room to be made better, as it were, and jumped on what I think is probably the most exciting trend there is, which is this kind of movement to sourcing ethical produce, movement to investing in your food again, movement to just enjoying, you know, food cooked at home once again, because that's one of the biggest problems in the industry, is that a lot of people in the food industry as a whole is that people have lost that connection. But back to your question, what am I? I mean, yeah, all of the above, really. You know, I actually don't work in the shop anymore. I don't work really processing any of the orders, mainly because, you know, to grow this business and to keep it going where it's going, it's impossible to be doing those jobs and also working on what's kind of more important in terms of the marketing and brand awareness and really kind of try and propel this forward for the future. I guess that's where my kind of capitalist side comes in, because I'm always thinking about how to make it bigger and better for lots of reasons. You know, it's not just to make money, but, you know, once we get more of a reach, we can then affect more people, and those people will then ultimately have better food to eat every day. You know, it's, you know, I'm not a saint, but you know, that is the truth of what we're doing. You know, the more aware people are of what we're doing, the more they'll start to question what the supermarkets are giving them, or what maybe a not so good butchery is giving them. And then the sort of price thing becomes a little bit less relevant, because obviously, you know, as you know, the stuff that we sell is very expensive, but it doesn't mean that everyone's put out of the market. You know, it just means that you need to find things that are appropriately priced for you. There's tons of things you can do for nice weekly meals that don't cost, you know, Wagyu beef prices. It's just that we also do sell, you know, a portion of our business is devoted to really, really high-end stuff. But yeah, I mean, for us, the business is all about doing things properly. And that's kind of how I ended up leaving what I was doing, because I just wasn't completely happy. You know, I started off as a trader for a small firm, went to an oil company and then to an investment bank. And by the time I got to the investment bank, it was sort of, you know, it was just a mundane role, really. You know, I wasn't really doing what I wanted to do. And that was quite lucky, because it gave me the opportunity to sit back and think, right, what do I really want to do over the next kind of what I call the best 20 years of my life, which is, you know, these next 20 years. I think from 25 to 45, you know, you've got a really, really massive opportunity to do something you love. And a lot of people unfortunately get stuck into that rat race idea, which, you know, we're all sort of sadly led down that path, because we all go to uni, then we go, you know, and get the job, and that's kind of what everyone does. So I was very lucky to have that foresight and to kind of have my, I guess, midlife crisis or epiphany at the age of 28 or something, or 26. Yeah, so left and started, you know, what you know and love today.
There's so much to sort of unpack in what you've just said. I think
Yeah, going back. I mean, you said it was interesting what you said about giving people what they want and what they need, because actually what we've been seeing is this sort of this push towards plant-based foods, and what's kind of great is to see you thriving doing exactly the opposite of that. And what you're effectively saying to me is actually, no, you know what people don't want, or at least not everybody wants plant-based food. What people want is really, really good quality meat. And judging by the speed at which your business has grown, there's obviously some truth in that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I say multiple times when I'm in the shop talking to customers, or even talking to some of the guys that work for me, that veganism is by far the best thing that ever happened to the meat industry. And people look at me funny when I say that, because they think, well, how can that be true? But the reality is, if you look at it properly, and you trade the idea right, then it's a win-win for whoever gets involved in the right way of doing things. Because veganism has shown a massive flaw in the food, in the meat industry. That is that the meat industry has been for a long time very non-transparent. You don't know where your stuff's come from. It's en masse. It's cheap. It's just run-of-the-mill rubbish stuff that no one really knows where it's from or even why they're eating it. They just go to the supermarket, pick it up, put it in a bag, go home, either cook it or freeze it, and then it comes out another day. So veganism has said, well, no, that's all wrong. Actually, what we need to be doing to live a healthy life is to just eat plants. Now, you and I know that's completely not true, because we have forward-facing eyes, we have sharp teeth, and we have a brain that is very large and that can compute a lot better than, basically being on all fours and eating grass. We were never meant to do that. So the idea behind veganism is flawed, and the idea behind eating commercial meat is flawed. So there is a solution, which is to find and farm and then go and find other farms, who also believe in the same sort of idea behind actually sourcing proper food, aging it in a way that is I guess, the way I see it is the only real way of doing things, but aging it properly, and then actually charging your customers, so that you actually make money out of it. There's no point in doing this and doing it on the cheap. We don't do anything on the cheap. That goes for the equipment that we buy, the fridges that I personally make, the custom built fans, the dehumidifiers that we use. Now, if you went to a standard place, they wouldn't even think about doing any of this, and they would try to do it as cheaply as possible, because the product they're selling, in their eyes, is not able to generate enough money to afford those things. So you kind of got to look at it and bring it back to, okay, what do you want out of this business? What is your idea on how this business should be? And if at any point your idea is cheap, there's always someone that's going to do it cheaper. That's just the reality of the world. You can't get away from the fact that the supermarkets have got the deepest pockets in the world, and they're never going to be outdone on cheap meat. So why would you want to support it to start with? And then morally and ethically, it's just the right thing to do. There's no one on the world that is thinking to themselves, oh yeah, I'm really pleased that, those cattle were fed in a barn their entire lives, and the pigs, basically didn't have enough room to even turn around their entire lives. There's not one person who would think to themselves, yeah, that's a great idea, I should eat that kind of food. And then coupled with the stuff that actually goes into your meat, so, the inputs that they eat, why would anyone in their right minds want to eat some of the crap that is fed to commercial livestock? It just doesn't make any sense. So yeah, the trend for me is all about this kind of idea behind ethically raised produce, dry aged properly. It's really just bringing it back to basics. If you think, pre-wartime, nearly everything was organic. Like, there wasn't a label. It was just organic because there was no need, or there was no idea behind, okay, right, well, let's, if we got this field, instead of making, let's say 1,000 tons, we spray this shit on it, and then we've got 4,000 tons out of it. And then we'll mass it. So that's kind of where it's all gone wrong. And that's really where, I guess, a portion of greed, but also a portion of, we need to feed all these people. There's so many avenues you can go down, with on this area. But the reality is that no pesticides or herbicides are good for the environment or us. In our butchery, we don't use any artificial preservatives in any produce that we sell. So everything that we make is always made simply with the meat and our spicing or salt and pepper. That's literally it. I don't actually know any other butchery in the UK that does that, because every other butchery I regularly buy from other butcheries, because that's the way you got to see what they're up to, so to speak. I haven't found one place that puts salt and pepper, or anything else. And it's sad, because that's really important too. We do genuinely stand by what we say, and we want to give people the best quality produce that is ethically raised. And I don't think it's as hard as what a lot of people make out. I just don't agree that it's not that hard to find good quality farms, because I think there's a lot of good quality farms out there that just need to be found and marketed in the right way, or brought on board by someone like us. And all of a sudden they've got a pipeline, of steady sales for their farm. It's just that, unfortunately, the industry, I guess a lot of people maybe just don't know that they can market their produce that way, and then their produce gets stuck, down into a commercial area. And then you have some really nice stuff going through the commercial side of things too, which no one really knows about. So that there's, the industry is flawed in many ways. But as I said, I think the most, it's one of the most exciting times for meat, because you have got everything against you, right? Every single thing is against you. Until you see something, cool in the news where they start saying, oh, maybe we've got it wrong. Actually, meat and dairy is not that bad. So the needle's turning,
Yeah, but Joanna Blytheman, she's out there. She's giving us the good news.
It's happening. But the other thing that's really, really important is that we have to find other people committed to making that change. I don't class people doing the similar sort of thing to me or us as competitors. Of course, we're competing to some extent, but we're competing at a different game to what the others are. That's the true competition. The supermarket is the true competition, and not in a way that we want to, annihilate them on sales. We just want to say, look, guys, there is an alternative if you want to eat good quality food and do right by the planet, and not have to just eat, some form of soy curds flavored with numbers and e-numbers and letters that you can't.
Yeah,
see it, but maybe I'm.
I don't think you're wrong at all. I mean, it's interesting because what you say about veganism. I mean, on my channel, whenever I've had vegans come and kind of say, oh, you guys need to look into things and find out the real truth and all this kind of stuff that they come out with. The reality is that when you start engaging with those people, you find that if you look at, say, the carnivore community and the vegan community, they normally want the same things. They just disagree on this very, very fundamental issue of how to get there. But like you say, the values are the same. You've got two groups of people who are very passionate about trying to do the right thing. And when you then look at regenerative agriculture and how, we've got people farming carbon negatively, farming animals carbon negatively, it makes a mockery of all this sort of, methane emissions nonsense, which, with animals is part of a biogenic cycle that goes up and comes down. And, then there's this great elephant in the room, which is the fact that, we're digging up carbon from under the ground and burning it. And we don't want to stop doing that. And everyone's blaming farming. It's just, but anyway, I mean, we could go down the world's biggest rabbit hole there. But I think you've explained why you're different from a high street butcher or from a supermarket butcher necessarily. So, who are the clients for Thomas Joseph Butchery? Who are they? Are they local? Are they online? What kind of people are they? Who do you deal with?
So I would say that the makeup of our business is about 40% online. And then we have about 55% then is obviously in the shop. And then 5% is wholesale customers. We don't really do a huge amount of wholesale simply because it's just not good bang for our buck. There's no point in us doing stuff for not having the money we need. I mean, we do a few places, but they don't really pay that much differently from people coming into the shop. I don't think for us it's really the best area to get into. I don't enjoy not being paid for 45 or 60 days whilst, someone's sitting there and they can't be asked to pay us. Or actual problem. That's one of the things you have with a lot of restaurants and wholesale people. But our kind of clientele locally, I mean, it's really mixed. Obviously, as you know, well. We probably have one of the biggest ranges in terms of stock, locally and probably online. You know, if you compare to nearly anyone, we're right up there with having a real huge amount of stuff, and that goes from, you know, grass-fed lambs, grass-fed beef, free-range, you know, pasture-raised pork, all the way up to 4 or 5 different types of Wagyu from across, you know, the world. So our customers really are extremely varied, just like our produce. We have lots of people who are, you know, really dedicated to sourcing quality produce for their health. But we also, on the other hand, have lots of people who just want the absolute best tasting piece of meat. And we're very, very lucky and fortunate in that we can kind of offer that to both people. And that was always the goal with the business. You know, the truth behind me getting into it was just simply that I enjoyed the industry because I was buying a lot of, you know, what I thought was great quality dry aged meat. And I kind of just said, well, you know, why can't I do that? You know, what's stopping me make my own quality dry aged meat? And we're able to cater to that kind of area of the market very, very well, as you know. So sorry, I just lost train of thought.
No worries. Let me ask you. So I think a lot of people struggle with the way beef, so let's take beef, okay? So the way it's sometimes described, you know, you'll hear people say, oh, I've got this this Wagyu, it's a Wagyu cross, or it's Spanish Angus, or it's a Hereford, grass-fed Hereford, whatever. So just explain what that means, because we're not talking necessarily about where that beef comes from, are we? We've got different breeds, even though those breeds might have place names. So just explain to us a little bit, what are the fundamentally the different breeds that you guys stock, and where do they come from, and why maybe would you choose one product over another? What might a Spanish, you know, a Galician Blonde, what might that animal offer over, say, some Wagyu from Sussex?
Yeah, so we, as you know, we do a huge variety. If we start with kind of Wagyu as the most expensive and exclusive part, we do 4 or 5 different types of Wagyu from Australia and the US. Now, if you want Wagyu, you know, you're looking at super marbling, super fatty cuts that are, I guess, not probably something you would probably eat every single day. They're just very, very filling. They're not like a normal kind of piece of meat. We do have UK Wagyu. We do quite a lot of UK Wagyu. So that's usually what we'd call F1 Wagyu. So it's a Wagyu cross. Wagyu generally cross with Angus, which does really, really well outside. So we've got a couple of different suppliers there. And if you, again, you know, pound for pound, that's really, really good quality, and it's not as expensive. So the UK stuff, obviously, it's going to be more expensive than your, you know, average beef, let's say, but it's not going to be anywhere near the kind of money you're getting from, you know, the real kind of exclusive places over in Australia and the US, simply down to the marbling and I guess the branding. You know, that the US stuff and the Australian stuff has got a big following, and they're able to charge for it, you know, and people like it. If you go from that to sort of the opposite end of the spectrum, obviously our farm here does original population Herefords, so they're a native breed, and that's kind of, you know, if you're looking for something like that, I guess you'd be looking more for the health benefits. You know, they're completely pasture raised their entire lives, they're outside, only eating a forage based diet and or haylage and silage, and that kind of beef is exactly what we try to sort of source from other farms. For me personally, I like shorthorns, I like blue greys, and the Highland cows as well. You know, we source a lot of stuff from Scotland, because you can get, well, for me personally, I just think that a lot of the farms up there do really, really good quality grass-fed farming. And then if you go over to sort of Europe, we do the Spanish Angus, which again is a very, very kind of well put together piece of meat. They obviously know their genetics well, and that, I would say, is kind of your cross between UK and maybe, you know, the high end Wagyu. I would say that it's got the marbling content, it's got the fattiness to it, it's absolutely gorgeous to eat, it's lovely and tender. So if you were wanting something that's maybe a little bridge between the two, that's probably where I'd go. And then after that, you know, we've kind of got this ex-dairy and Galician kind of area. So the Galician beef that we do is always reared to about 8 or even 12 years old. It's a lot older. spends a huge amount of time outside on pasture, roaming around on the hills in Galicia. And that is kind of, well, a completely different kettle of fish in terms of what we think about beef. It's not always that tender. It's all, generally, I would say 9.5 times out of 10 got this glorious yellow fat. It's, obviously been eating a lot of grass and led a long life. But it has this unique, I guess, overly beefy flavour that you just can't, you can't put your finger on it being anywhere else apart from there. So if you were into your steaks, that's kind of a great area to go to, but with the caveat that it may not be as tender. And then the last thing that we kind of do a lot of in the UK and a bit from Europe is ex-dairy. So ex-dairy beef being a dairy cow once, then retired on pasture for a minimum of 12 months, sometimes up to sort of 2, maybe 3 years. And these are cows that would have probably just gone into the standard system, but they've been retired, allowed to sort of gain some fat and some really heavy marbling. And again, similar to the Galician, they become a very, very flavoursome piece of meat that is not really something that's very standard at all. And a lot of people have it and they kind of can't believe that's beef because it's so tasty compared to what they may have had normally. And even in our shop, if you compare it to a lot of the sort of UK stuff, once you've had a UK ex-dairy, it's quite hard to go back to eating something that's maybe not ex-dairy, just simply because of the flavour profile. Again, sometimes not as tender, but for me personally, I quite like having something that's a little bit of a chew. I don't want it to be tough, but it's quite nice to actually feel it instead of it being, buttery and melting away completely.
So if we consider nature to be the breed and nurture to be the way it's raised, what it's fed, where it lives, to what extent? I mean, obviously, to my understanding, you have to match the breed of animal to the location, in that you can't put some great hairy Highland in boiling hot country because it's too hot for it, and vice versa. But are these animals gonna end up tasting the same if they're raised the same way, or does the breed itself have a flavour that you can discern?
That's a good question, actually, because I think it really depends. For me personally, I find the shorthorn breed to be the most consistent, good flavour and tender beef in the UK. I just find it doesn't matter where it comes from. We have lots of different farms that have shorthorn be consistently great. That being said, I do think that where an animal is or has lived does have an impact, and obviously what it's fed on. If it's eating the best quality grass from a field where it's got acres of room and it has no stress, it's going to taste very, very different to something that stressed or is not eating great quality grass, and that is a big part of it. So obviously, when you do anything at scale, you cannot see every blade of grass that an animal eats.
Yeah.
But idea behind kind of finding farms that you consistently get good quality stuff from. At the moment, we're using a lot of red poles from a friend of mine over in Cheshire because they're completely grass fed and outdoor raised, and they've been amazing. The great yellow fat, gorgeous kind of smell once they're aged for 4 weeks or so, and pound for pound been absolutely fantastic. So I don't think there is any one great breed. I just think it's nice to know what you're eating, and you should always ask. And then at least you have sort of, some feedback. You can actually
frame of reference.
Yeah, exactly. I like that, and that was that. So if I get it, or if my butcher gets that in again, I'll have some more. But that's also about finding that relationship. One of the things we try to do is actually tell everyone what it is when we're selling it, and that's important to me because it means that we're doing our jobs properly. If you don't actually know, then there's something wrong with what you're doing.
Yeah,
no industry is to be selling something they don't know where it came from.
I mean, it's interesting. I can remember reading in Weston A. Price when he's talking about the study of the Swiss mountain communities, and the cattle there are taken up very, very high up close to the snow line during the summer months when the glacier retreats. They go up very, very high up the snow line. and the grass up there is different apparently, which affects the sort of nutrition of the milk that they produce, and then presumably, you know, you'd have to infer the meat as well. And I can remember I think the best tasting piece of meat I've ever had from you was some Finnish Simmental, which probably had a similar kind of environment, a very pure kind of clean air, clean water. You know, and I wonder whether we have a problem globally now with this reduction of nutrients in our soil. You know, we're so busy monocropping and building cities that we're reducing those nutrients and that environment which we need so badly for these animals.
Yeah, I guess we are to an extent, and unfortunately, you know, go back to the vegan idea is that's only going to make that worse. You know, because the whole system, you know, if you look at just the earth as one whole system, it needs to operate in a state of flux at all times with what it needs. And predators have got to eat meat, and, you know, the other guys are not supposed to eat meat. They've got to eat grass. You can't sort of change where we are. Particularly at this stage where there are so many of us, it doesn't make sense. Okay, yeah, let's grow the population by another couple of billion, and then we can't really do anything because there's so many people, and the only way to feed us is with something liquid. Oh, great, yeah, let's keep going. You know, it doesn't make any sense. So, as you said, you know, that has had an impact across flavour profiles, definitely, and that's why there's such a big difference in the flavour of stuff that we produce and sell compared to something that hasn't been anywhere, that, you know, has seen outside or is eating a very standard ration. It's going to taste like the ration. You know, your beef is going to be bland because it's eating bland food that is not designed for beef. If it's eating beef cake, which is honestly what it's called, it's going to taste like beef cake. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So are people coming in and asking for grass-fed meat, or are you simply saying to them, guys, this is what you want?
Combination of both, I think. As I said, a lot of people come here just simply for quality. That's just very obvious. They just want really, really good quality stuff. That's great. Some other people want to ask questions. You know, they want to sort of understand a little bit more about it. And then on the other side, you know, we have people who are just sort of wanting, you know, only something that's ethically raised and proper. But we don't. Our marketing, obviously, online is done in that way that we tell people what it is. We tell them it's grass-fed. In the shop, we've got a little bit of it. But to be honest with you, I think it's more about building that trust over a long time. You know, you can't really get it all out in one go, because people will buy something and then they need to come back and kind of buy into the idea of the real proper farming over a period of time. But don't really run it down people's throats, so to speak, but it is what it is. I think the proof is kind of in the pudding. And, you know, when you've got a display out in a shop and, you know, all the fat on the outside of the forerib caps and the sirloins and everything that we've got in there is all yellow, then it sort of says itself, because people come in and say, I've never seen beef that looks like this. And I say, well, that's not really very surprising.
Yeah, it looks like a cupcake. I mean, you know, so I'm interested to know with regards to the fat. I mean, as you know from our dealings, I'm all about the fat. And actually, I mean, recently I've cut back a little bit, but it was always when I was very strictly carnivore, that was where all my energy came from. And so I would eat these very fatty cuts of beef. And of course, we both know that fatty beef traditionally has been seen as being awful. You know, people look at it, oh, well, you know, they served me this ribeye and it had a big chunk of fat in the middle, and the rump steak had a big bit of fat on the edge, and I don't want that. So have you seen this changing? Are people embracing the fat a bit more? Have you seen anything, you know, from the kind of low carb world with people coming in and saying, actually, yeah, you know, I don't eat a lot of chips, but I want a fatty steak? Are you seeing that at all in your dealings?
Yeah, I think you've got two very distinct, different people who kind of come in and want fatty meat. You've got the person that comes in and says, oh, I know I shouldn't, but I'm going to anyway. I love the fatty stuff. And they don't realise how important that is. They literally got no idea how healthful they're being by, you know, eating something really fatty. And then on the flip side, you know, you've got people like you and I who understand the whole idea behind, you know, saturated fat, and it's so vital to health that reducing it down seems like the most moronic thing in the world. There's not a lot of those people, you know, there's not loads and loads of people that are coming in and kind of wanting low carb stuff. But I think the needle has started to change. I think people are slightly more aware, albeit it's a very, very slow trajectory. I think it's going in the right way. You know, people are definitely cooking more at home since lockdown. That's a fact. People are definitely more involved with their food because of veganism. Veganism has made people actually want to find out where their food's from in terms of meat, if they're going to eat meat. And then you have that other portion of society that just doesn't give a toss about really anything. They're just going to carry on doing what they're doing. The idea really is to sell what you're selling to the people who want to buy it. And then once you've done that, think about how to convince the other people into something if it's a good product. The idea should never be to try and sell your product to someone who doesn't want it. And that's the mass market. The mass market does not want it because they just don't care. So over time, what I hope and I sort of see happening with, you know, more and more people is that actually we will get people more invested in their health. We will get people more invested into low carb diets because it's clearly the only way that our world is going to survive. But it's definitely promising in our shop. Definitely. And, you know, obviously we sell loads of organic veg online and in the shop, and we don't have really anything that's kind of too carby. You know, it doesn't really go with what we sell. So, yeah, I think it's definitely positive, mate. I think we've definitely got something to go with. We're a lot further on today than we were, let's say, 10 years ago. A lot. You know, and don't get me wrong, I know other areas are a lot further on, like how easy it is to get a Big Mac at home. I understand that's on the other side of it. But in terms of meat as a thing, I definitely think we are, you know, we're on the right path anyway.
So one of the things that you've mentioned a couple of times is this issue of dry aging. So where wet aging is cutting up an animal's carcass, sealing it up in vac seal, let it sit for a couple of weeks and then put it out on the supermarket shelf. Explain to us what dry aging is. Explain to us why it's so important and how you do it. You've made these fridges, you've set them up yourself to your own specifications. Tell us about it.
So essentially dry aging is pretty much kind of, I guess, what the original butchers back in the late 1800s used to do. You know, it's very, very simple. You basically hang stuff in a fridge. Now, back in those days, they weren't able to keep anything really much longer than a few days. So everything would be slaughtered, brought in, chopped up within a couple of days, and then, you know, it'll be out. But a long time ago, someone worked out that if you know, cut the carcass up very, very short after slaughter and vacuum packed every part of it, you could make a lot more money because you're not losing any moisture, and then you're selling that to whoever buys it. So if you work back from that principle, that's why it's not widespread, is that it costs a lot more money. So when I started wanting to learn how to dry age and kind of thinking about how this should be possible for any person to achieve, I just sort of started researching, thinking about how you kept things for a longer period of time and how to do it properly, not to just do it to a standard that was okay, to actually have, you know, the best kind of facilities that we could actually do ourselves. And I taught myself with a little book. I think you can get it online. It's like How to Dry Age or something. Made a little beer fridge into this dry aging unit with some salt and some fans, and sort of taught myself, I guess, the nuts and bolts of what I needed to know to do it at a bigger scale. So essentially dry aging really is just altering the environment that anything is kept in, to allow it to be, you know, maturing over a period of time instead of going off over a period of time. Sadly, the majority of dry aging is sort of just decomposing meat that's going off and is just being kept and being held onto. Very, very different to actually dry aging at any scale, because what we do is alter the environment so that we've got a lower humidity than what it should be. So we withdraw it down to 85%. And then we have custom built fans all in the ceilings of our cold stores to whiz the airborne bacteria, which are present in the air that we're breathing now, faster and faster around, so they can't really lay down on any surfaces too fast. That's kind of what happens when you're having something decompose. All airborne bacteria will, decompose any type of dead thing, so to speak. And what you're trying to do is slow the rate at which they can. And what happens is that after, let's say, 2 or 3 days of being in our environment, the bacteria started to dry out the surface. Obviously, in that instance, you're losing moisture. It's not losing moisture from the entire piece of meat. It's just losing that area on the outside. And what that does is it makes it self-limiting. As the bacteria start to progress, they build a crust, which they then can't go through anymore. And that's where it sort of stops. As you know, we dry age stuff for a very long time, up to sort of 150, 200 days sometimes for certain people. And we can keep stuff for, that time in a very, very good way, simply because we're altering the environment to what I believe is the perfect condition to keep stuff at an optimum level without mold growth. You can go one step further and you can fit your cold store with UV lamps, which will take out pretty much all of the airborne bacteria. But that is a little bit defeating the object of what you're trying to do, because yes, okay, we've made it really, really clean. Actually, you need some bacteria to perform the job, and you need some form of aged flavour, otherwise it won't be aged. So, I think it's best to sort of step away from that unless you really can't get your environment to where it wants to be. And it might sound like I've literally just given everyone that listens to this the ability to go home or start their own business dry aging. And I tell everyone how to do it, because the reality is that it costs so much money to carry on doing it in terms of, and there's so much waste involved that a lot of people don't, have the ability to do that or want to. And that goes for anyone who's in the industry now. No one is not stopping no one doing it, but if you want to do it properly and you want to do it at scale, it just costs a lot of money. That's the reality of it. Because you're keeping it for a long period of time, Well,
I suppose you're keeping it for a long period of time, but you've got, let's say you've got, you've got a beef forward that's 18 inches long, and you dry age that, then the outside of it after 60 days is going to look like Tutankhamun's balls, and you've got to cut that off. And then you've lost that bit, and you've lost moisture as a whole. So it then weighs less and it's smaller. So you've got to charge as if it was the bigger piece that it once was.
Yeah, I mean that's part of it. You've basically lost a certain amount of product, and over the course of 30 to 40 days, we will lose 10% of our product. But obviously, the most costly part of it is the powering of the fans, the powering of the dehumidifier. That's the most costly part, and the fact that we basically try to take, or we do take, nearly everything fresh, simply because I don't want it being at someone else's cold store in whatever they correct. And that means that we're buying stuff well before we're ready to use it. So again, it's capital outlay. You've got a lot of money sitting around in your fridges. You've got a huge amount of stock at any one time. There's a lot more to it, but they're the kind of things that as you grow, you're able to develop, and you're able to sort of do what you do. But it does make it very hard for anyone who's wanting to start doing it, because it's just nearly impossible to be able to do it at that scale, because you're not really sure how to do it. But secondly, you've got to put in so much money to it, and you've then got to sell it. You've got to get rid of it to someone at some point, which you need on customers. So that's the kind of things that just don't, they're not just there when you start, right?
Yeah, and I suppose that I mean, from a consumer point of view, I thought about it at one point. I could get an old fridge and do this or that. Yeah, or I could call Tom and just get his really good dry aged beef, and then I could have it all the time instead of 45 days down the road, for a couple of days. So look, all right. Let me ask you a few pop questions. All right. Your favorite steak, cut and sauce.
And by sauce, you mean where it's from. You don't mean like mayonnaise.
No, we're not into mayonnaise. Screw mayonnaise.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, favorite cut. Well, I mean, I'm going to be a bit picky because you haven't told me I can only have one, but I actually love all of it, mate. Like I literally, you know, I think there's so many good cuts and they're all for different purposes. There is no one best cut. When someone says, "Oh, I just love ribeye," it's like, well, have you thought about any other part of the cut? You know,
no, you can only have one. You can only have one from now forevermore.
Okay, if I was going to have one thing forever, you know, I think I would go with something like a piece of rump.
All right, like it. The king of steaks.
Yeah, because, mate, you know, when, you know, on a nice summer's evening, you've finished work, you've had your steak out for a couple of hours, it's pretty warm, you just season it with some salt, like the barbecue, bish bash bosh, you know, you're loving it. You know, there's nothing not to like on a piece of rump. And the fat that you get, you know, that little nugget of fat underneath the kind of, underneath the picanha area of the rump cap, oh, mate, pop that off, have that with the rest of the steak, you know, you're done.
Amazing.
Yeah,
amazing. I like your style. And so are you? I take it from that you would agree with me that really the best way to cook a steak is over coals.
Yeah, I don't think I've cooked in a cast iron pan now for maybe like 2 years.
Ooh, controversial.
I know, because I just don't enjoy it. I don't enjoy the buttery oil fattiness of it compared to having on. And I find I love lighting the fire, mate. Like I'm a child at heart.
Yeah,
I'm tired of doing it. And if I'm going to have one plate, you know, I want to go and do it over the coals.
It speaks to a very kind of primal part of us as well, doesn't it? It's like the comfort of the fire and the food being part of that fire, and then sitting by the fire and eating the food is a very primal thing.
Yeah, definitely. You know, you can't deny it. You know, when you eat it over or after being over coals, you cooked it over the coals, you just sort of feel like it was what you were meant to do. Now, I'm sure we were meant to go on foot for 2 or 3 miles and, you know, slowly kill it somewhere, which doesn't sound great, but that's probably what we were actually meant to do. But yeah, I agree. You know, and it's one of like life's unique pleasures that, you know, doesn't really cost anything additionally, but having a crackling fire on, you know, and actually cooking it and hearing the sear and the flames licking the meat, it's just like you can't beat it, you know.
Yep, I agree. All right, low budget. What is your budget steak? If someone wants a good steak and they don't want to spend the earth,
or budget cut. So if we were talking a steak, you know, you got to be thinking Bavette. It's ribeye, and it's got buckets of flavour. It's absolutely delicious steak. You know, really, really good. Great over the coals or in a pan, doesn't really matter. I just go for the coals because I love it. But anyway, you can have it with chimichurri sauce. You can have it with nothing. You can have it with, you know, fries if you want to. You can have it with a salad. It goes with everything. And then if you were thinking about just a cut, I would definitely go shin of beef. You know, so simple, so tasty, gelatinous, yummy. You know, you think kind of getting into wintertime now, sticking it on in the morning and leaving it there all day. You know, there's not like about it. You know, yeah, they're my 2 budget cuts.
Tom, where can people find you? If anyone in the UK, you deliver to their door, don't you?
Yep, we do next day delivery, even if you purchase on the day before up till 10 a.m. So if you purchase today, well, it's already gone, but obviously tomorrow by 10 a.m. we can still get it to you the next day. We ship to everywhere across the UK. We do ship to Northern Ireland. There is a surcharge, and we do ship offshore up into the Highlands, but again, there is a surcharge. If you ever want anything bespoke, just drop us an email, hello@thomasjosephbutchery.co.uk. Website, as I just said, thomasjosephbutchery.co.uk. You can find us on Instagram, Thomas Joseph Butchery. That's pretty much it. But yeah, obviously, if you're local to Brentwood and Essex, you can pop into the store. It's open from Tuesday to Sunday. So yeah, plenty of options.
Mate, that's amazing. Thank you so much for your time. So what I want to do, if it's all right with you, I want to come down with a camera one day and see your fridges and see all the meat and ask you some more questions. And maybe if anybody's got questions for you, if they post them in the comments, and then when I come and see you, I'll ask you and we can just do a little follow-up. And that'd be great. Thanks so much. It's, and thanks for doing what you do and making a difference in this whole space, because I think it is needed, and everybody that's doing it is to some extent putting their head above the parapet. So cheers, mate, and thanks for being here.
No problem at all. As I said, I do think the needle's turning, and I do think that people are starting to go the right way. There's definitely more, not competition, but there's definitely more people trying to do a better job. So that's all we can kind of ask for,
Awesome.
That's it for now. Come and find me on Instagram at Ruston's Boneyard and at www.rustonsboneyard.com. Keep cooking.